Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest Worth Publishers TLC Symposium, The Hidden Power of Interactive Teaching Activities, Retention, Assessment, and Engagement, featuring C. Nathan DeWall of University of Kentucky. Dr. DeWall is an Associate Professor of Psychology at the University of Kentucky. He earned a BA from St. Olaf College and an MA in the University of Chicago, and MS and PhD degrees from Florida State University. He has 3 interconnected research programs: how people respond to social acceptance and rejection, self-control, and aggression. He has earned over 110 publications. With Dr. David Myers, Nathan is the new co-author of a teaching column in The Observer on integrating cutting-edge psychological science into the classroom. He is also the new co-author on David Myers' series of introductory psychology textbooks. So we are very lucky to have Nathan DeWall here today. Before turning over the presentation to Nathan, I just wanted to go over one thing. Throughout the presentation, there will be opportunities to respond to questions, or if you need to get in touch with Nathan or me, you can do that through the chat box. I do have everybody muted on arrival, so you can hear the speaker better during the presentation without a lot of background noise. But if you need to communicate with us, during the presentation, you will see a green bar that looks like this. I just kind of ruined it, but there's a green bar, and you'll hover over that, and then you will click on this icon over here that says chat on it. It will bring up a chat box, and there are a couple options here. If you want to share your thoughts with all of the participants, just click all, just make sure all participants is selected. If you want to share it with both Nathan and me, you would send your message to host, presenter, and panelists, which is one option. And then host would be just me, so if you wanted to ask any questions about the TLC program in general, you might want to just send it to me. So with that, I'm just going to turn over the presentation to Dr. DeWall, who's obviously the person you really came to see. Hold on one second. This takes a second to transfer over.
All right, wonderful. I am so glad to be here, and I'm just going to start my presentation and to talk to you about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, which is how we can reach students and how we can do so through very straightforward activities. And specifically how we can accomplish really 3 different goals. But before I get to those goals of retention, assessment, and engagement, I just want to sort of reiterate what Andrea said. This is meant to be very much an interactive sort of discussion-based webinar. For a few of you have I recognize many names, and I see that some of you have attended webinars of mine in the past that are kind of more research-based webinars. And this one is really sharing my experience as an educator. And so I strongly encourage you to use the chat function to ask questions throughout the presentation. I'm going to do my best to answer all of them. And I also built in times after each sort of subsection of the presentation where you can share your own experiences. All right, so let's get started. So interactive activities, I think we've all sort of talked about them, heard about them in some way, but I'm going to talk about how we can use them to accomplish 3 different goals. I think retention is one of the biggest biggest goals that we have in higher education. Not only do we want to educate students, but we want to keep students. And this can be a big challenge, regardless of whether you teach at a 2-year institution, a 4-year institution. If you're teaching undergraduate students, graduate students, I know that this is something that I've faced as an instructor over the years. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience of how I've tried to use different teaching techniques to retain students a little bit better. I'll also talk about how assessment can be made fun and interesting using interactive activities, and finally, we'll talk about engaging, sort of trying to engage students' interest through these sorts of activities. And again, one thing that I really want to reiterate is I'm speaking from my own experience here. I'd love to hear about your experience, but this is really my experience that I'm sharing with you. So you feel free to adopt anything that I'm talking about here. And if you have questions about ways that you might do that, we can talk about that toward the end of the session. So let's start with retention. Now, as I mentioned, retention is a very big issue in higher education, but it's also one of the most mysterious things. We all want to retain our students, whether it's retaining them throughout the semester. I know I've spoken to many professors at different universities who lose a lot of their students, sometimes half of their students over the course of their semester. Other folks sometimes are more concerned about retaining students across the entire college sort of lifespan from year 1 through year 4 or to graduation, or from year 1 to year 2. But I think all of us are very much interested not only in sharing and imparting knowledge related to psychological science, but also how we can use that to help students get a sufficiently interesting, education so that they're motivated to come back. And so not only is this sort of mysterious, but I think a lot of people, when they talk about retention efforts, they think this is the most difficult thing that we could possibly do. So this is a picture of Sir Edmund Hillary as he's ascending to the top of Mount Everest. He was the first person to do this. And what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is that it doesn't have to be that difficult. And in my experience, not only is it not that difficult if we sort of take a different approach to it, but it can actually be extremely fun and rewarding. And so my primary place of employment is at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky. And there are many positive things about University of Kentucky. I've had a very good experience working there. But like any institution, it does have some challenges. And one specific challenge that it faced was with retention. And so the University of Kentucky is in a conference of schools called the Southeastern Conference. And one problem that we've been having for many years is that we are relatively low, I think second to last, if not last, of all universities in our conference in terms of retaining students from year 1 to year 2. And so if you think of, we start off with 100% of the students, what we're finding at my institution is that we are losing almost 20% of students. So roughly 19% of the students we are not coming back to University of Kentucky to take part in their second year of college. So this is a lot of students. This is a non-trivial amount of people who are missing out on continuing their education, and also from the university's perspective, the university is missing out on a lot of money from tuition dollars and other sources of income that students bring with them to campus. So this is a problem in lots of different ways. And one thing that that happened was the dean invited a few faculty who they identified as working well with undergraduate students. I was one of them, and got us into a room and said, this is our problem. and what we'd like for each of you to do is to try to think of a solution to this. So why do you think this might be happening, and what can we do about it? And they sent us away, and I thought a little bit about it, and we came back and we sort of pitched our ideas. Now, as Andrea mentioned, one answer to this question that made sense to me built on some of the research that I've been doing over the years. And this is, I think, a great example for me of this false dichotomy between are you a researcher or are you a teacher. I'm both, and they both inform each other. And this is an example of how I used my interests in human social connection, and I brought that into the classroom to try to address this problem of retention. And it really is based on this idea that humans have a fundamental motivation to belong, to have positive and lasting relationships. And what we found over the years is that when this need to belong is threatened in any way, it dampens people's motivation, it reduces their performance on academic tests, it compromises their relationships. It has all sorts of outcomes that might detract from a person's college experience, especially early on in school. And related to that, we have to think about what is the first-year college experience like. We know that it's stressful, but what type of stress are they experiencing? And I remembered having breakfast 6, 7, 8 years ago with a leading loneliness researcher, someone who had studied lonely people for decades. And I said, and I asked her, I said, who are the loneliest people that you have ever measured in your studies? And without skipping a beat, she said, first semester college freshmen. And I said, are you serious? She said, yes, without a doubt. And this does make sense if you think of things in terms of where first-year students on average are at developmentally in terms of their goals. They're oftentimes ripped from their existing social networks, from their home life, and they're thrust into this new environment. And it's oftentimes very difficult to sort of recreate that sense of belonging that they've had for many of them for most of their lives. And so what would happen if we created, and so this sort of the straightforward solution, if that was the problem, is I said, well, what if we created a community and where and the mission of this community would be to connect students with each other, with faculty, and with the community, with the Lexington, Kentucky community, so that they really felt as if they weren't alone, that they could speak with their college professors, that their professors would know who they were, and this is a difficult thing oftentimes at a big school like the University of Kentucky, where a lot of times their classes have 2, 3, 4, 5, even 600 students in them, and so this is what we did, and we wanted to create the first residential college system to try to redefine what an educational experience could look like at a big university or at any university, and whether or not this would sort of pay off in terms of retaining students. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looked like, and it took the form of something called A&S Wired, so Arts and Science Wired. And although it's situated within the College of Arts and Sciences, we have students who are from all of the colleges in the university, and we started this. We're now in our 3rd year of A&S Wired. And so about its mission of trying to connect students with each other, faculty, and with the community. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I do that. So I'm one of the co-directors of the residential college, and in this, one thing that we do that we offer students very small classes that they take. They take 2 of these over the course of their first year. And one thing that I do is I think many of us have tried to do what's called a flipped classroom. And what I do is I call it kind of a slight flip with an occasional push. And so one thing that I do is I'll have for a given class session, I'll assign some reading, and then what I'll do is I will separate the class into sort of groups, small groups, and each group does one specific thing. And I split it into 3 different components. The first different component that that a small group would do is to really go back through, and what they're going to do is they're going to summarize the material that we read for class that day. The second component that another set of students, what they're going to do is they're going to go through the material that we read, and they're going to try to apply it to their own life or to a real-world event. Now, they can do this by using their smartphones to look for YouTube videos, to look for newspaper articles, any other thing that's going to pay off for them in terms of applying this to their own life or to a real-world event, and students love to do this. I think this is one reason why students take psychology in the first place. The third component that another group does is they develop discussion questions that are relevant to the course reading and that can engage student interest. And so then what I do is I give students about 5 or 6 minutes to sort of work in their groups to develop this, and then they give these short presentations to the class. It gives students an opportunity to get some public speaking experience, so by the end of the semester they've all done this multiple times, and they have a lot less fear of speaking in front of other people. And another thing that I do is whenever they're forming their groups, I ask students that they can't be part of a group in which they know anyone. And so they are constantly meeting each member of the class. And so this is a way that they can connect with each other. During that 5 or 6 minutes, I'm coming around the classroom just like the professor in this slide. And I'm trying to make sure that they're on task. I'm asking them questions. I'm challenging them if they say, well, I don't really know if this is right, or if I can tell that they might not be working up to sort of their potential, and I try to say, what about this and what about this and all these sorts of things, and students really do enjoy that. And so this is, kind of a type of flipped classroom, and then when I say with a slight push is that I tell students that I will call on them, and I'll just if nobody is talking, that I will just sort of, if discussion comes to a lull, that I'll just start calling on people, and we'll get discussion going that way, and they're completely fine with that, and they get used to that. Students have so much experience getting lectured to in their academic lives, and so what I think is very, very useful is to have them be in an environment where they get used to talking in class. Now, one question I got is, what size of class do I do this with, very large or smaller classes? And I've done this both ways. I've done this in classes that range from 25 students to 200 students. All right. So another thing that I do is I have students, I think a lot of times students, they want to make choices. They want to be heard. And so one thing that I do is I always am wanting to have students relate the material that we're covering to their own life or to everyday events. And I want them to do activities outside of class that encourage them to do that. And so one thing that I do is I say, what we're going to develop class activities. What I want you to do is form groups of 3 or 4 students, and develop an activity that applies what we've been learning over the past week or 2 weeks, and give us an activity that we can do outside of class that is going to help bring that activity to life. And what we do is essentially is we, after this, I give students about 5 or 6 minutes to talk about their ideas. And then what I do is we go around the class and the groups pitch their ideas to the class about why their idea should be the best one. And then students put their heads down on their desks. They raise their hands for the idea that they think is the best one, and then that is the choice that we use. And so what this does is it gets students sort of actively thinking about activities that really do use the course material and sort of applies it in a way that they can use it outside of the classroom. And it also encourages students to be very creative and take really an active role in their education instead of just me handing them activities all the time. So I do that. I do hand them activities, and we'll talk about some of those later on. But I also think that giving students, number one, the opportunity to develop an idea, but also the opportunity to sort of propose their idea is a tremendous skill that they're going to need in the workforce. And so students really do enjoy this. And we've had all sorts of fun activities that came about during this pitch session, I call it. One activity that we had, we were reading John Gottman's book on marriage. And in that book, Gottman has lots of activities that married couples can do, questions they can ask each other to see how well they know each other. And what one group said was, we want to apply this to see if, being in a class with someone over the course of a semester, if you do get to know them pretty well, just like if it kind of applies outside of romantic relationships. And so they picked some appropriate questions from the Gottman book, and we did that activity where we devoted a day of class to this activity where they asked every single member of the class the prescribed questions that were decided. They got a score about how well they knew all of the students, and then we tallied up the score at the end, and we crowned a champion. And students really did enjoy that. Another thing that I do and that I've done in the past is using activities that I really would like to do on my own, and I just kind of invite students to take part in them with me. And so one thing that I've done a few times is something called National Novel Writing Month. And so this is, during the month of November, you write a 50,000-word novel from scratch. And so what I did was I started a student group where students from the residential college, they could participate in this with me if they wanted to. Now, you might be asking, can a first semester, college student actually write a novel? And the answer is yes, they can. I didn't say it had to be a great novel, but we had, I think the first year, I think we had five or six students do this with me, maybe a little bit more than that, and I think 2 of us finished our books that year. And we would meet for an hour every week, and we would have fun doing like different writing competitions where you would see how many words you could generate in 10 minutes and 5 minutes, and it was amazing. I mean, even though we only had two people finish, to have a first semester college student generate 15,000 words of a novel, I think is pretty remarkable, and we had lots of students who were generating over 10,000 words. And so I said, this is so much fun. We did it a second year, and there we had, I think, over 15 students who joined me, and I think that we had between 4 and 5 students who finished. And again, this was just a blast. It was a wonderful activity, and I plan to keep doing it. A lot of times people talk about, feed students. This is the way that you get them together, and I think that's partially true. Whether you're giving them food, or one thing that we do in the residential college is giving the students coffee and some food. But what we do is we have these weekly coffee chats that last about an hour, and we try to embrace this mission of social connections. And so we have different students from across campus come and talk about themselves, and people can sort of interact with them that way. So they talk about their background and what major they have and all sorts of other sorts of things. We also have the more popular thing that we do is we have faculty members come and do the same thing, and this gives students an opportunity to get to know what professors are like and how people became professors and what their story is like. And we also have members of the Lexington community come, and so we've had people who there are professional coffee growers come and talk about what that's like to grow coffee for a living. We had the mayor of Lexington, Jim Gray, come and talk about his experience and what his experience was like in college, how he got into politics, what his experience was like working with former mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, and all of these sorts of things. And the students really do enjoy these activities. And finally, one thing that we do is we try to embrace technology in different forms. And one thing that we do is we give all of the students iPads. Now, I know that this isn't going to be possible for everyone or maybe most people, but one thing that we've tried to do is try to sort of use the iPad in an educational way. So in the classes that I teach in the residential college, virtually all of the activities take place using the iPad. So every book that they read is on the iPad. All of the notes that they take, they use applications. If students want to use their laptops, they can. If they want to use their notebooks, they can. But for certain things, I do require them to use the iPad. So I have them make movies, and they need to use the iPad to do that, and other sorts of things. And it might seem like a lot, like how can we afford to spend $40,000 or $50,000 on buying all of these students' iPads? Well, one thing that we can do is we can, if we're going to pitch an idea like this, even if we want to buy 10 iPads, well, let's look at the retention rate that we had in the first year of this residential college system. So remember that we started with losing almost 20% of students from year 1 to year 2. We were losing 19% of the students. What we found is after the first year of this wired program, we retained about 92% of the students. So we effectively cut this retention rate, retention loss in half. And we replicated this in the second year. We didn't quite get 92%. I believe that we had roughly between 89 and 91% retention rate. So it was still substantially higher than what it had been. So one thing that you can sort of think about is these are some of the things that we did to try to retain students, and it was really founded on connecting them with each other. And I think that we can do this in lots of different ways. Again, this is just my experience of things that I've done in the past. And what it does, I think, is it sort of gives us a new understanding of what an educational experience can be like. But also, when I think one thing that's happened is that the university really does like retaining students. As I mentioned earlier, financially, it's a big payoff to have students coming back. And now what we're finding at my institution is that these sorts of residential college and living learning communities are just becoming a lot more common. The president of the university is very much interested in having a lot more of these. They've started a lot more. We have new dormitories going up now, and an exciting part of this is that we're getting to have a say in how these dormitories, these residence halls, are designed so that now they have built-in classrooms so that the students can participate in these living learning communities. So it's a great, it's been a great experience. And there's also science that backs this up. And so Greg Walton and Jeff Cohen published a very nice paper in Science magazine a few years ago where they really targeted this idea of social belongingness and intervening, and specifically targeting minority students. And what they found is that by boosting a sense of belongingness, it improved academic outcomes of minority students, specifically African American students, in this study, and it also improved health outcomes of these minority students. And one thing that we're also finding in A&S Wired, although we didn't intend for this, but it matches up with the Walton and Cohen findings, is that we're finding that students are having very positive experiences in Wired, and we're finding especially positive experiences among African American students, which is wonderful. So now we can take just a couple of minutes, and if any of you have experiences that you'd like to share about different things that you've tried to do to retain students, I'd love to hear about them, and we can sort of share. If you'd like to, you can share them with the group, and you can type them in the chat box. All right. Do we have anyone who's... It looks like we have a lot of deep thinkers, but if you're still thinking about what you'd like to share at any time, feel free to type it in there. But if nobody is interested in sharing their experience. Oh, here we have someone. Oh, and I see Eileen Marie. I see her in her webcam. Oh, but I can't hear you, Eileen. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Eileen, do you think that you could type?
If anybody doesn't know where the chat box is, because everybody is on mute right now, if you don't know where the chat box is, just hover over the green bar at the top of the screen, and there'll be an icon that says chat, and that's where you can bring up the chat box and share your experiences.
Great, thank you, Andrea. So one question from Mary is, we're just starting a first-year experience. How do you advertise, market, and get students interested in the program? We do this a couple different ways. The first way that we do it is we send out postcards to really all students who have applied, who have applied to the University of Kentucky and been accepted. Another way that we do this is there are times where we have what's called Merit Weekend, where students who qualify for merit-based scholarships are coming to campus a lot of times with their family to look around. And I've gone there and talked to them about the Wired experience. We send emails. We do all sorts of things. And so, but a main thing that we do is we send postcards and we give presentations, and we work with our Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, who has people who work there who are that their job is recruiting new students, and they give them all of the information about this first year experience program. All right, so, and then Shelley has shared an experience. All right, so I have students raise a virtual child, software from book, and then I have several parenting groups throughout the semester to apply the developmental concepts learned in class to their virtual children issues. Students enjoy this a lot and feel engaged with each other. I think that's a wonderful activity. Raising a virtual child is, I mean, that sounds like a blast. I would love to know a little bit more about the software that you use so that I'm not sure if I would teach a child development course, but when I cover that, when I teach introductory psychology, I think that could be something that'd be great. I really like that, Shelley. Well, one question that I had, does effectiveness vary among different groups, minorities, women? That's something that we are looking at right now, and so we're currently writing up these papers, hopefully for publication in higher education journals. Another question is, time. How do you cover all of the needed text material and still incorporate many activities? And really, I mean, one thing that I do is I just allot time in class for activities, and I just I tell students I expect you to do the reading, and for example, when I teach introductory psychology, they get a quiz almost every day, a short 5-question multiple choice quiz. They do it every single class session with the exception of 2. And so they know. So I know that they've read the text, and they know that I'm going to check to see if they've read the text. So because of that, they're walking into the classroom, and I don't have to sort of go back over stuff that they've already read, and it frees me up to spend 10 minutes in a class session, having students do some of these activities. Some of the activities take a little bit longer, and so in there, I think it's just up to the instructor. Like, is it something that, is it worth it to you to take half of an entire class session? If I often teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which is an hour and 15-minute session. Can I take half of that session, or even an entire session once a semester, and devote it entirely to one of these activities? And for me, this is something that I've decided that it works well for me, and that I think it doesn't detract from the student's educational experience. But again, these are just my experiences. And some of the things that I just talked about, they weren't tied to a class. Like the novel writing thing, that was not for credit. Students, that was just sort of an extracurricular activity that I did. All right, so Tony Henderson. I do a number of group activities throughout the semester where students are randomly assigned to groups and work together for the class time on an assigned activity that has to be submitted at the end of class. This semester I tried for the first time getting them to write multiple choice and long answer questions. Oh, that's great. They do seem engaged, but I've yet to find out if they actually like it. I tell them that the best questions I'll use on the exam, and some of them are pretty good. I think that's a wonderful activity. I would have never. Wow, that is great. And again, I think this speaks to students really taking control, not control, but having an active voice in all, different components of their educational experience. So I can see that I would predict that the students would really like this. And I think one reason is they feel a sense of control, but also that they feel a sense of belonging with the instructor. So I think, oh, that's a great activity, and I'd love to follow up with you, Tony, about to see how well your students actually like it. All right, so just to keep us a little bit on track time-wise, because I have a lot of material to talk about specifically with engagement. Now I'll talk about assessment. And I think a lot of times when we talk about assessment, especially when we're teaching undergraduate students, and even more so with early stage undergraduate students, a lot of times my students, they get very anxious and nervous about this, or they get tremendously bored, or they think that they're going to. And because they might not know that in psychology we use statistics a lot, and they want to, I think, I know from my experience getting into psychology, I really wanted to get into it because of the big questions and the excitement and how I could apply it to my own life and understand others. And so what I do is I like to call it the Trojan horse model of teaching assessment. And so what I do is I start with a question. Instead of saying, what we're going to do is we're going to teach assessment, I'm going to say we're going to try to talk about when we're talking about personality, when I'm in that module, who are you? I mean, this is a big question. And when we talk about the sort of trait theories, well, one thing that we begin with is I say, how many different adjectives could you use to describe yourself? And we get dozens and dozens and dozens of these sorts of things, right? I don't know if any of you have tried this in your classes, but it's very difficult to have that many personality traits. And so how can we sort of would it make sense to sort of look at those adjectives and see that some of them are going to be more similar to each other than others, and they might form sort of more general factors, let's call them, personality traits. And then we talk about the 5-factor model of personality. And so again, these are early stage undergraduate students, first semester freshman students who have not learned about factor analysis, but we've just sort of talked to them a little bit about taking lots of different personality adjectives that could describe you and how some of them might sort of hang together more than others. And then we talk about, the 5-factor model of personality and how they might help to explain what a person is like. And when you're trying to understand, who am I? How might people see me? They might think in terms of these 5 factors: conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness, and extroversion. And then we talk about that, I ask students, do you know anybody who might be high or low in some of these sorts of things? They might talk about, a lot of times the most common thing that people talk about are their siblings. But then I also ask them, who are maybe some celebrities that score high or low on some of these, if you just had to guess? And are there, or maybe famous athletes? And we get some discussion going, and then I say, okay, now we're going to measure where you are on these 5 factors of personality. And so I show them this 10-item personality inventory, and that's available online at Sam Gosling's website. Sam Gosling is a personality psychologist at the University of Texas at Austin. And it's a very short personality test, and it's valid and reliable. And students fill it out. And then what I do is I teach them how to score it. And so, so I teach them how to reverse score items. And then all that they do is they take the average of their 2 different questions for each factor, and then that forms their extroversion score, agreeableness score, conscientiousness, emotional stability or neuroticism, and openness. Okay, so by doing this, we've begun with a question, and now students actually know how to complete an assessment instrument for the 5-factor model of personality. And then what I do after participants learn a little bit about where they're at in terms of the 5 factors, then what I have them do is I have them take this same scale and give it to 3 people who they think know them pretty well. Usually it's one of their friend or roommate, friend, or a family member, and have them have your family member complete this according to how they think you would answer these questions, and then compare how close they were. Do they know you pretty well, or do they not? And what does this say about how well you know yourself? And so this is an activity that students really enjoy. And one thing that we often talk about are, what are some examples, or which factors really seem to be the ones where there's a lot of agreement, and ones where there's less agreement. And the most often one where we get agreement is on extroversion. I see myself as pretty extroverted. The people around me see me as pretty extroverted. And so then we have sort of a discussion about that. And so that's one example of how I teach about assessment. But as you can see, I'm teaching about an idea first, and I'm teaching them about how assessment is a tool that we use to try to answer psychological questions. And I think we have time when if you have your own experiences about teaching assessment, I think we have time for 1 or 2 people to share your experience. All right, so it doesn't look like we have anyone who's going to share. All right, so what are some assessment activities, or some engagement activities, rather? Well, one thing that I try to do when I'm teaching about motivation, and for example, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or in social psychology when I'm teaching about romantic relationships, is I try to talk to students about the importance of relationships, and one way that we can understand the importance of our social bonds is when those sort of bonds are taken away or when they're threatened. And so for this activity, what I do is I call it a Facebook fast. And so for 3 days, students can't use Facebook. And so they are, I give them 5 days to do this. And so what that does is it enables them to have, a day or 2 to warn people in their network, in their social network, that they will be off of Facebook for 3 days. But they can still text with each other. They can still use the telephone. They can still email, but they just can't be on Facebook. And then what I do is I have students write a blog post. We use Blackboard at my institution. And so they write a blog post that's 200 words that describes what that experience was like, and what it taught them about the importance of social connections, if they noticed anything differently, how it affected their lives. And the most common experience that I have with students is they just say, I didn't realize how much I was on it, and I didn't realize how sort of the volume in my head was turned down when I wasn't constantly checking for updates, when people weren't constantly sending me messages and things like that. I have had lots of interesting experiences. One student, his mother, called him in a panic because she hadn't seen him on Facebook in a couple of days. And so this is why I really encourage students to let people, let your friends and family, members of your social network know that you're not going to be using it for 3 days. And then, at the end of 3 days, use it as much as you want to. And students have a very, very wonderful experience with this. They like it. Now, another thing that I do is I do sort of this in reverse. And so I say, the long lost friend activity. And so what I have them do is, get in touch with someone they haven't spoken to in a very long time. It might be a friend from their childhood, or it might be someone maybe that they've just spoken to one time, but they never spoke to again. And so, and oftentimes students actually use Facebook or other methods of social networking to do this, and it's actually very easy to do this. So they contact this person and they just sort of talk to them, and the requirement though is that they can't tell them it's for an assignment. And so they shouldn't be contacting anyone that they genuinely don't have an interest in reconnecting with. And students, then what they do is they write a 200-word blog post about the importance of social networks in their lives, what their experience was like, what this tells them about human motivation, why they got out of contact with this person, and what does that tell us about sort of basic principles of motivation. Here's where I talk to people about just sort of basic things of how our sort of basic principles of motivation apply to hunger, also apply to relationships. So if I'm really hungry, I'm going to work hard for food, but if I'm full, I'm not going to work that hard for food. A similar thing happens with relationships. If I don't have any relationships, I'm going to work hard to get them. But if I have lots of relationships, even if I have too many, sometimes I just want to have time to have a friend. And other times, my life just changes. A common thing that happens with students is maybe they moved, they switched schools, and they got out of contact with people. I've had some of the most rewarding experiences as an instructor hearing students talk about their experience with this activity. People talking about, I didn't know that I was, living so close to someone that I was best friends with in elementary school, and they live just a few miles away, and we're going to get back together. So this is a great activity that I use. Another activity that I use here when I'm talking about biology, when I teach about biology and specifically endocrinology, is I use TED Talks, TED TED Talks, and I specifically have them watch the TED Talk by this woman whose name is Amy Cuddy. And that's C as in capital, U, D as in door, D-Y, Amy Cuddy. And she has a wonderful TED Talk on nonverbal behavior and how it influences your hormones. Specifically, if you are really expansive in your body posture, it can cause your cortisol levels, your stress levels to go down and your testosterone levels to go up. And then what I have participants do is students do, is I have them do what's called, I call it field day, where I give them an opportunity to compete with other members of the class. They form pairs. And what they do is they go around campus, or if campus is close to downtown, anywhere that they can get to, and they can do a couple of different things. The object is to get as many points as possible. And so they can do this in two ways. The first way is they can just keep track, they can record all of the people that they see, or each person that they see, and whether they were in a high power pose like this, or a pose that was very expansive, and the participant's gender, or if they were in a low power pose and the participant's gender, and they get 1 point for each of those. But another thing that they can do, and they can, instead of earning 1 point, they can earn 5 points, is if they can actually change a person's nonverbal behavior without them knowing it. And so in Amy Cuddy's talk, she talks about how there's a natural sense of a need for complementarity in our body language. So if someone has very expansive body posture, a lot of times the other person will become a little bit lower, have a little bit lower power. And so what students can do is they can, without people knowing it, they can approach strangers and try to change, use that understanding of this sort of the science behind body language and endocrinology to try to change other people's nonverbal behavior. And you would be shocked at how easy this is to do. And so they can earn 5 points for doing that. And then, so they get 50 minutes to do this in an hour and 15-minute class. Then all the students come back. They've scored their material. They have another partner with them who can verify everything. And then we talk about who came in first, who came in second, and who came in third. Another activity that I use when we talk about, norms and how they guide our behavior. I have students break a social norm, so I'll give them a week to do this, and I tell them, what I want you to do is, now that you know a little bit about social norms and how they inform our thoughts and our feelings and our actions. Now I want you to break one, but you can't break any laws when you're doing this. You can't do anything illegal. And then what I have them do is I challenge them by saying that the 5 most creative responses and correct responses that I get will get some extra credit points. And some examples that I've had recently, so I'm on sabbatical this year at Hope College here in Holland, Michigan, which is relatively close to Chicago, and I had a student who rode the Amtrak train on her way back from Chicago, and on her way back she started kind of impersonating a conductor. She just kind of came up to random strangers and asked if she could see their tickets. She didn't do anything to the tickets, but she just said, can I see your ticket, please? And people did. I also had a student several years ago who went to a Subway on campus and got behind the counter. He was wearing, at that point, a green collared shirt was kind of the standard Subway attire, and he got behind the counter and made a sandwich. But my personal favorite of all time was when I actually gave this assignment in class. I told them, about breaking the social norm, how I wanted them to do that. And then I had this experience that I don't know if you've had, where a student's phone rang in class, and that does happen occasionally, but this had never happened to me before or since, where the student started talking on the phone. And there were, about 200 students in the class, and so it was a big classroom, big auditorium, and she kept talking, and the whole class got quiet because they said, oh my gosh, I don't know what she's doing. And I came over to her, and I said, are you talking on the phone? Is that what you're doing? And she said, oh, hold on. Yeah, he keeps talking to me. Yes. And I said, are you talking on the phone right now? She said, yes. I said, you can't do that. And she got back on her phone. She said, it worked. She hung up, and she said, I just broke a social norm. It was an amazing experience, and the whole class applauded, and that was 7 years ago, and I'm still in touch with that student. So it was a very engaging activity. Another thing that I talk to students about is how, various things in our social lives are contagious, how psychological states can be contagious. And so we watch part of Nicholas Christakis' TED Talk on social networks, and how you can, and how things like happiness and loneliness can spread through social networks, how people you've never met before can influence your emotions. And then I have students sort of discuss a little bit how this might apply to their own lives, how other people might be affecting them, and even people they've never met before, what that says about how they're currently feeling. So we're a little bit short on time. So one thing that I want to talk about So we talked about retention, assessment, and engagement. Another thing that I also want to alert you to is that my collaborator and I, Dave Myers, and I write a monthly column that's published in the Association for Psychological Science journal, The Observer. And it's a teaching column, so it's called Teaching Current Directions in Psychological Science. And so each month, each one of us, Dave and I, separately take an article that's been published in Current Directions in Psychological Science. We provide a brief summary of it, and then we talk about how we can take that cutting-edge research into the classroom. And so a lot of times we have very sort of practical activities that you can use. Sometimes we get them from the authors of the articles, and we found and we've received some feedback that these activities can be extremely useful to people. All right, so that is all that we have time for, so I ended right on time. And now I can take any questions or further comments from people.
And as with any other comments, type those into the chat box. While we'll give you a couple seconds to type, I am going to just bring up the APA continuing education information for those of you who need it. Direct your attention back to the WebEx screen if you are not already. If you plan to request continuing education credits, you're going to get a form to fill out via email after this presentation. The Worth Publishers TLC program is approved by the American Psychological Association to sponsor continuing education for psychologists. And in this form, it's going to ask you for this code that I'm showing right now on the screen. It's supposed to prove attendance. The code is D as in DeWall 0312. So this is a 0, D0312. So like DeWall, March 12th. So you will be getting that along with a recording and the PowerPoint a little bit later on. I also archive all of the past recordings for webinars as well as list the upcoming events on Faculty Lounge. I will provide that link to you as well. So let's take a look at the chat box.
All right. So I know that we are a tad bit over time, and Andrea, do we have time to talk just about these last two points?
Oh, absolutely. For those of you who have to leave, who have to go to class, feel free to hang up. Thank you for coming. For those of you who can stick around, I'm going to turn control back over to Nathan DeWall.
Great, great. I'm sorry that we are just going maybe a couple minutes over, but I really wanted to talk about these activities that Martha and Mary brought up. First, we'll talk about Martha's. She says, I use the Draw a Tree projective test during class. Very interesting to analyze with students as they volunteer. I think this is great. For a variety of different reasons. Teaching about projective tests, the history of them in psychology, I think is very useful. It's another opportunity to talk about validity issues. So how well, when do people use the Draw a Tree test? Is it a valid and reliable measure of things like personality and experience? And I've also used different types of I use this one type of projective test that's similar to the draw a tree test, where I have students draw a house, a tree. They can draw a picture, and it has to have 5 different elements: a house, a tree, a car, and 2 people. And I don't give them any instructions beyond that. And I give them 5 minutes to draw it, and then I have students, measure the distance between the 2 people in the picture, and I say, what do you think that says about, about you as a person, and what's your, your approach to your relationships, and what if I had you put that person, what if the two people in the picture, what if one of them was you and one of them was your close friend or a romantic partner or a parent, and we get some great discussion going. And so I've used that type of similar thing in my experience, again, is that students really do like that. So I think that's a great idea, Martha. Mary says, I have my students self-evaluate after a test on how they think they've done, areas they felt confident in, what they did not recognize, how they prepared, what they might do differently next test. I think that's great. I haven't done that before, but I could see how you could sort of use that and loop that in with the literature on confidence and performance, and oftentimes and specifically overconfidence. And so I think that's really, really, really fascinating. All right. So I think that's about it. And again, I want to thank you so much for coming and participating in the webinar. I had a great time being with you this hour, and I hope to see you soon.
Yes, and thank you, Nathan. This was a wonderful presentation. There were a lot of great interactive examples. And thank you for everybody for taking an hour out of your day to attend. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.